I stared at the cream-colored envelope in my weathered hands, my name written in elegant calligraphy across the front. David Michael Harrison. After 32 years of single parenthood, seeing my last name paired with another family's on a wedding invitation felt surreal. Inside, the words blurred momentarily as emotion caught in my throat. Michael James Harrison and Sarah Elizabeth Chen request the honor of your presence. My son was getting married 28 years ago when Michael's mother walked out on us both, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen counter and the lingering scent of her perfume. I never imagined this day would come. She couldn't handle the responsibility she'd written, couldn't handle being tied down to a crying baby and a man who worked double shifts at the factory just to keep the lights on. I was 24 then, barely more than a kid myself, suddenly, thrust into the role of both mother and father to a 6-month-old who looked at me with those trusting blue eyes. The early years were a blur of sleepless nights, formula preparations at 3 a.m., and learning to braid hair from YouTube videos when Michael insisted he wanted to grow it out like his favorite cartoon character. I made countless mistakes, burned more dinners than I care to remember, showed up to parent-teacher conferences with grease still under my fingernails from the auto shop where I'd started working after the factory closed, and struggled to explain why other kids had mommies when he only had me. But somehow, we made it work. Michael never seemed to feel deprived. He was my constant companion, my little shadow who followed me around the garage on weekends, handing me tools and chattering endlessly about his day at school. When he got older, he'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I prepared. Dinner, both of us comfortable in the routine we'd built together. I thought about Sarah, the girl who'd stolen my son's heart during his junior year of college. The first time he brought her home, I was nervous as hell. What did I know about impressing a young woman from a well-educated family? Her parents were both doctors, and here I was, a mechanic with calloused hands and a high school diploma. But Sarah had surprised me. She'd rolled up her sleeves and helped me fix her car's squeaky brakes in the driveway, laughing when she got grease on her designer jeans. "Your dad's amazing," I overheard her tell Michael later that evening. "You can see how much he loves you in everything he does." That comment had meant more to me than any compliment about my mechanical skills ever could. Now, as I held their wedding invitation, memories flooded back like scenes from an old movie. Michael's first day of kindergarten, when he'd clung to my leg and refused to let go until I promised to pick him up right at 3 p.m. His Little League games, where I was often the only parent cheering from the bleachers because I couldn't afford a babysitter for work events. High school graduation, when he'd walked across that stage and looked directly at me, mouthing, "We did it, Dad," with tears in his eyes. The phone rang, interrupting my reverie. Michael's voice filled the kitchen, warm and excited. "Dad, did you get it? The invitation?" "Just opened it," I managed, my voice rougher than usual. "It's beautiful, son." Sarah insisted on the fancy paper. You know how she is about details. I could hear the smile in his voice. "Dad, I need to ask you something important." My heart skipped. "What's that?" "Would you walk me down the aisle? I know it's unconventional, but you're the one who raised me. You're the one who taught me what love and commitment really mean. I can't imagine anyone else giving me away." The invitation slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the linoleum floor. In all my imaginings of this day, I'd pictured myself in the audience watching proudly from the pews as my son started his new life, but walking him down the aisle? Being the one to officially hand him over to the woman he loved? "Dad? You still there?" "Yeah," I whispered, bending to pick up the invitation. "Yeah, I'm here. And yes, son, I'd be honored." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of all our years together. 27 years of just the two of us, and now he was ready to build his own family. I should have felt sad, or lost, or worried about the emptiness that would fill my house after he moved across the state with Sarah. Instead, I felt proud, Proud that despite having only one parent, despite the struggles and the sacrifices, Michael had grown into the kind of man who would honor his father in such a way. Proud that I'd somehow managed to raise a son who understood the value of family, even when that family looked different from everyone else's. The wedding was in 3 months. I had a suit to buy and a speech to write. Most importantly, I had a son to walk down the aisle, just as I'd walked beside him through every other important moment of his life. 3 weeks before the wedding, I stood in Meyer's formal wear, feeling like a fish out of water among the rows of tuxedos and bow ties. The young salesman, probably not much older than Michael, looked me up and down with barely concealed impatience. "What's the occasion?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "My son's wedding," I replied, running my hand along a navy suit jacket. "I'm walking him down the aisle." The kid's expression shifted slightly, confusion replacing his boredom. "Walking him down the aisle? You mean you're giving away the bride?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm walking my son down the aisle. His choice." I could have explained, told him about the years of single parenthood, about being both mother and father, about earning the right to this honor through 2.5 decades of midnight fevers and homework battles, and teaching my boy how to drive stick shift in an empty parking lot. But I didn't owe this stranger my story. "Oh," the salesman said, clearly out of his depth. "Well, let's find you something nice then." An hour later, I left with a charcoal gray suit, a silver tie, and a strange mixture of pride and terror churning in my stomach. At home, I hung the suit carefully in my closet next to my work clothes and wedding gift for Michael and Sarah, a toolbox I'd been crafting by hand for months, complete with all the essential tools a young couple might need, and a few they wouldn't know they needed until life taught them. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah's parents had graciously included me in the wedding planning, despite my protests that I didn't know the first thing about flowers or centerpieces. Margaret Chen, Sarah's mother, had a gentle way of making me feel valuable to the process. "David," she said during one of our planning meetings, "you know Michael better than anyone. What kind of music does he really love? Not what he thinks he should like, but what makes him happy." That I could answer. Michael had inherited my love of classic rock, though he'd tried to hide it during his teenage years when he thought it wasn't cool. I suggested a few songs for the reception, and Sarah's eyes lit up. "Perfect," she said. "Those are exactly the songs he plays when he's cooking dinner for me." It struck me then how well Sarah knew my son, how she'd noticed the little things that made him who he was. She'd paid attention to his habits, his preferences, his quirks, the same way I'd been doing for 28 years. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that Michael had chosen well. The bachelor party was another story entirely. Michael's college friends had organized something involving paintball and a steakhouse, but Michael pulled me aside the night before. "Dad, would you rather just hang out? Maybe work on a car or something? The guys are great, but I'd rather spend the time with you." We ended up in my garage, sharing a couple of beers while I taught him how to rebuild a carburetor on my old Mustang. It was perfect, just the two of us, our hands dirty, talking about everything and nothing the way we'd done countless times before. "Are you nervous?" I asked as he carefully cleaned a part with solvent. "Terrified," he admitted with a laugh. "But not about marrying Sarah. I'm scared about everything else, being a good husband, eventually being a father, living up to the example you set." I set down my wrench and looked at my son. "Michael, you've already exceeded any example I could have set. You're kind, thoughtful, hard-working, and you treat Sarah like she's the most precious thing in the world. That's not something I taught you. That's who you are." "You taught me that love means showing up," he said quietly. "Every day, no matter what. You taught me that family isn't just about biology. It's about choice and commitment and being there when it matters." The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, looking at the pictures that chronicled our life together. Michael's first steps, taken in this very living room, his high school graduation photo where his proud smile matched my own. The picture from his college graduation, where Sarah appeared for the first time, her arm linked through his. Tomorrow, I would put on that charcoal suit and walk my son down an aisle lined with flowers and filled with people celebrating his new beginning. I would place his hand in Sarah's and step back, officially passing the torch of his daily care to someone else. The thought should have devastated me. Instead, it filled me with a profound sense of completion. Every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt about whether I was enough, it had all led to this. Michael was ready to build his own family, and he was taking with him everything good I'd tried to give him. I finally fell asleep on the couch, surrounded by 28 years of memories and dreams for his future. The morning of Michael's wedding dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect September sky that makes you believe in good omens. I woke up before my alarm, my stomach a tangle of nerves and anticipation. In a few hours, I would walk my son down the aisle, a moment I'd never imagined but now couldn't picture any other way. The ceremony was at 4 p.m. at Riverside Gardens, a beautiful venue about an hour outside the city. I'd driven past it countless times over the years, never imagining I'd one day be an honored guest at an event held there. After a quick breakfast that I barely tasted, I showered and carefully put on my charcoal gray suit. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The rough-around-the-edges mechanic had been replaced by someone who looked like he belonged at a wedding this elegant. I arrived at the venue early, wanting to help with any last-minute preparations. The grounds were transformed, white chairs arranged in perfect rows, flower petals scattered along the aisle, and an archway draped in Sarah's favorite roses. Margaret Chen spotted me immediately and hurried over. "David, you look wonderful," she said, adjusting my tie with the maternal efficiency I'd come to appreciate. "Michael's in the groom's suite getting ready. He asked for you specifically." I found my son in a small room behind the main building, surrounded by his groomsmen, but somehow looking completely alone. When he saw me, his face broke into a relieved smile. "Dad, thank God you're here." He was fidgeting with his cufflinks, his hands shaking slightly. "I can't get these damn things to work." I walked over and gently took his wrists, working the small gold links through the buttonholes with steady fingers. These were the same hands that had once struggled to braid his hair for picture day, that had learned to French braid and ponytails, through trial and error. Now they were helping him prepare for the most important day of his life. "There," I said, stepping back to look at him. "You look perfect, son." And he did. Somehow, when I wasn't looking, that gap-toothed little boy who used to follow me around the garage had become this handsome, confident man in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. But when I looked in his eyes, I still saw traces of the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Dad," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something before we do this." My heart clenched. "What is it?" "I know I never got to have a normal family growing up. No mom, no siblings, just you and me against the world." His voice was thick with emotion. "But I wouldn't trade our life for anything. You gave me everything I needed to become the man I am today. You showed me what real love looks like. Not the easy kind, but the kind that shows up every single day, even when it's hard." I felt tears prick at my eyes and blinked them back quickly. "Michael, let me finish," he said with a watery smile. "I asked you to walk me down the aisle because you're the person who brought me to this moment. Every bedtime story, every homework session, every time you worked overtime to pay for something I needed, it all led here. Sarah understands that. She knows that loving me means honoring the man who raised me." Through the window, I could see guests beginning to take their seats. Sarah's family, Michael's friends from college and work, neighbors who'd watched him grow up, and a few of my buddies from the shop who'd become honorary uncles over the years. "Are you ready?" I asked. Michael straightened his shoulders and nodded. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The music began, and we took our positions at the back of the aisle. I offered Michael my arm, and he took it with a grip that spoke of 28 years of trust between us. As we began our walk, I saw faces turn toward us, some curious, others knowing, all filled with love and support. Halfway down the aisle, I caught sight of Sarah waiting at the altar, radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, her eyes locked on Michael with such pure love that it took my breath away. This was why I'd raised him. Not just to become a good man, but to be capable of inspiring and receiving this kind of love. At the altar, the officiant asked, "Who gives this man to be married?" I had practiced this moment, but suddenly the words I'd planned seemed inadequate. Instead, I spoke, from the heart. "I do. With all my love and pride, and with complete confidence that he's ready to build a family of his own." I placed Michael's hand in Sarah's, and for just a moment, the three of us stood there connected. Then I stepped back, taking my seat in the front row, and watched my son marry the love of his life. During the ceremony, as they exchanged vows, they'd written themselves. I heard Michael's voice carry across the gathering. "Sarah, you've taught me that love multiplies rather than divides. The love my father gave me didn't make me have less to give you. It taught me how to love you better." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and they kissed to thunderous applause, I stood with everyone else, clapping until my hands hurt. My son was married. My job as his primary guide through life was officially complete, and he was ready to write the next chapter of his story with Sarah by his side. At the reception, during the father-son dance we'd agreed to share, Michael looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." "Thank you," I replied, "for making it all worthwhile." As I watched him dance with his new wife later that evening, surrounded by family and friends celebrating their love, I felt a profound sense of peace. Single parenthood hadn't been the life I'd planned, but it had been the life that led to this perfect moment, and that was enough. That was everything.